We keep saying that students are driven by marks and grades, and sometimes they are. Sometimes they are a lot. But a part of that is the regime we create for them. We create a system in which we value, we emphasise the marks, other people emphasise the marks. So surprise, surprise, the students focus on the grades, the marks, the percentages, rather than what they represent. But as far as learning is concerned, what matters is what those marks signify.
These things all need to be built into a course of study. But how can students really value these qualities, knowledge and skills when marks and grades are the focus of assessment? Well, we can change the assessment.
Okay, so if we're going to make judgments about students' work, or indeed if students are going to make judgments themselves, they need to do that in the context of the criteria. And the criteria are those indicators of what constitutes good work. So one of the things that we can do in the way we construct criteria is to both have them specific to the particular assignment, the particular piece of work that's being assessed, but also we should be able to link those to the wider outcomes that we want from the course, how well they're tracking over time to meet some bigger goals.
So the question is, how do we help tracking these broader goals for our students? I've developed online software at UTS that forges the link between assessment criteria and graduate attribute development.
So, what's the secret to getting the decent scores on students' evaluations then? What have you done in your subject?
Well, for starters, I've reduced the exam weighting down to 30%. But I actually think the main change has been to try and focus the students away from marks and instead get them to think about development.
Sounds nice in theory, but how do you do that and still publish 3 papers a year?
There's no easy answers. I use a marking and feedback program called Review, and the time-saving trick here is to write assessment criteria as feedback statements. What was that feedback you said earlier? References with appropriate quotes integrated into the text to support your argument. And we could even put in brackets, not just bolted on at the end like a list. And we can link that directly to the graduate attribute categories and the programme or the course learning goal categories.
Yes, but if they won't even read the rubric sheet, why would they read this online stuff?
Well, here's where your feedback wording gets to them. We can ask them to use these grading sliders to self-assess against each of the criteria before they have to hand in. You can tell them that the research shows that students practicing this get better grades than those that don't.
Yes, but will they do it?
In my experience, once you've shared the fact that students who self-assess actually improve their performance, I find that the majority are keen to give it a go. And students like the idea of using the same system that the tutors are going to be using.
But doesn't that unfairly influence the tutors?
No, because the tutors only see the self-assessment after they've saved their own marks.
Well, I like the idea that students have to take notice of what I'm telling them in this self-assessment. But I still think most students will just give themselves all high grades.
Ah, first-year boys. Well, the point is that when first-year boys go in to look at their results, 2 things happen. First, they see that there actually is no mark available yet, only the criteria with the grading sliders. So they have to focus on them and the feedback in order to see how they've done.
Ah, well, I bet they get a shock when they see their own high distinction self-assessments alongside the tutors that tell a different story.
Yes, the evidence we have is that they're much more thoughtful when they self-assess the second time. The challenge is to keep it personal. Own the criteria by wording them with what you actually value. For example, appropriate level of jargon and explanations given the target audience.
So why would students actually buy into this?
Well, first, because they get to fine-tune their assessment by self-assessing before they hand in the work. It's reminding them what's going to count. Second, I've told my tutors that if they see a self-assessment, they should tailor their feedback to address the gap between the student's self-assessment and their own. Students get personalised feedback to help them develop. And finally, they can get a printout, a PDF of their actual progress or results in a pie chart or a graph form, and they can show that to potential employers.
Leading up to this subject, the students would have had an opportunity to actually work on aspects of CRPRI in the various different subjects. In socially responsive design, it's an opportunity for the students to actually bring all of those together.
Even though we've had group work before, we never really had to merge styles so that it would look cohesive together.
There's your tutor, there's your group, and there's your client, and there are just so many conflicting comments and opinions that you kind of have to mediate between and kind of sort things out. It kind of grounds you in that you're not doing this for yourself. You have to be constantly empathetic.
Working with a real client or the community sector is so beneficial because you get an insight as to what it is you're actually designing for. You can actually make something that is more meaningful. You're more critical around what you're doing as well. So you don't have to worry about whether it looks good or not. You have to worry about whether it does a job.
The relationship with the students was really very positive. Extremely personable, extremely professional, well presented and always presented well. They were very innovative in the way that they came up with solutions. Along the way, all the other challenges that we had, like the newsletter or the website, they solve those problems.
No matter where you work, you do need to actually draw on all of the different graduate attributes.
With review, it made me work backwards, so from the assessment tasks back into what the course involves. And it really made me think about what is it that I'm getting these students to do beyond answering an interesting question and going into that research and inquiry phase that we get all students to go through. It really made me focus on what does this task involve and how is it really honing in on particular graduate attributes.
The best thing about this. Well, the self-assessment that then is followed by our assessment, so that the gap, and normally we think of the gap as the students assessing themselves too high, but very often the students that don't have a sense of how good they are.
Yes, and I found that the ones that self-assessed were the ones I could most easily engage and get to come to consultation times and everything, and their overall learning experience was definitely improved, and I would say I could see their improvement in their work that they were bringing me.
They had an essay, they had an exam, they had a presentation, they had a short tute paper. It was the first time in my, 15 years of teaching that I had students that read the feedback. It almost brought me to tears because I've spent years rewriting their essays and going back at the end of semester and getting back a box of essays that no one's looked at.
I'm rewriting and they did write it.
Yes. And this time it was like, I love review. I will use review for everything because they came back and said, I read my feedback. It's one paragraph. They read the little bar thing and they loved it. Every single student went to it and said, I really enjoyed review.